Wyoming Territory, 1882. The wind carried dust across the dry flats of Carbon County as the sun dropped low behind the hills. And Fiona Fairbairn hauled another sloshing bucket of water from the well behind the ranch house, her hands raw and cracked. A sharp voice sliced through the stillness. "Move faster, girl. That fence is not going to mend itself." Fiona didn't flinch. She just turned and met the hard eyes of Lawrence Pike, the man who owned the Broken W Ranch and her labor. She had been working for Pike for 8 months now. When her father got caught up in a lumber debt he could not pay, Pike offered to help in exchange for Fiona's work. It was not legal, not honest, but Pike never did anything by the law. He wrote up a contract and held it over her head like a noose. Her father, broken and coughing from the sawdust in his lungs, was kept in the bunkhouse, not allowed to leave until Fiona's labor cleared the debt. Pike made sure they both understood he held the reins. Fiona stole one glance toward the bunkhouse, where her father's curtain fluttered weakly in the window. Then she set the bucket down and turned toward the fence line. That was when she saw the rider. He came from the south trail, tall in the saddle, his horse a sleek black with a white star on its forehead. He rode like the land belonged to him, easy and quiet, but with the kind of presence you could feel before he even spoke. The man dismounted just short of the barn. Pike met him there. "This is private property," he barked. The cowboy took off his hat, revealing sun-browned features and a strong jaw. His eyes were a stormy gray blue, steady and unreadable. "My name's Xander Nolan," he said. "I'm not here to trespass. I'm here to talk business." Fiona kept her head down but circled closer, pretending to mend the fence while she listened. "What kind of business?" Pike asked. "I heard you got a contract on a woman named Fiona Fairbairn." Fiona's heart stopped. Pike folded his arms. "And what if I do?" "I want to buy it," Xander said simply. Fiona stood up straight. "What?" Pike laughed, but it was a dry, humorless sound. "She ain't for sale." "I got $5,000 in my saddlebag," Xander said. "That's probably 5 times what her father owed you." "I want the contract, now." Fiona's eyes snapped to Xander. She had never seen him before, not in town, not anywhere. Why would a stranger ride in with that kind of money for her? Pike looked tempted, then suspicious. "Why?" Xander shrugged. "Because I do not like the way you treat people. And I do not like the idea of anyone being owned." Pike hesitated. The man loved money more than power, and $5,000 was hard to ignore. Finally, he spat on his boot and held out the crumpled contract. "Fine, take her." "No," Xander said, calm but firm. "You bring her father too. It is both or nothing." Pike's jaw clenched. He looked like he might change his mind, but greed won out again. He waved a hand. "Take them and go, but do not come back." Xander nodded once. Then he looked straight at Fiona. "Pack your things. You are free." Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. She backed toward the house, then turned and ran inside. She had nothing but a small bag of clothes and her mother's Bible. She grabbed them and ran to the bunkhouse. Her father looked up as she burst in. "Fiona, we are leaving, Papa," she said, tears catching in her throat. "We are free." Xander helped her father into the wagon he had brought and tied the black horse to the back. Fiona climbed up beside him, still dazed. They rode west, toward the sunset, with nothing behind them but dust and cruel memories. They stopped 2 hours later at a quiet grove of cottonwoods. Fiona helped her father settle in the bedroll, and Xander lit a fire. "You did not have to do this," Fiona said quietly, sitting across from him. "You spent $5,000 for strangers." Xander looked at her across the flames. "I do not believe in letting people suffer when I can stop it." Her voice was soft. "Do you make a habit of saving women from men like Pike?" His mouth twitched almost a smile. "No, just you." Fiona looked away, her cheeks warming. That night, she lay on her bedroll listening to the hush of wind through the trees and the low breath of her father sleeping nearby. She stared up at the stars. She could not stop thinking about Xander. He had not touched her, had not looked at her with anything but respect, but something had settled between them in that short time, something she could not name yet. The next morning, Xander cooked eggs and beans over the fire. He handed her a plate without a word, but when their hands brushed, her heart kicked. "I will ride with you as far as Elk Hollow," he said. "You can stay at my place for a while, just until your father is strong enough." She nodded. "Thank you." They traveled slow, 3 days to reach Elk Hollow. Her father's cough eased with the dry air and rest. Xander's homestead sat at the base of Red Cliffs, with 2 horses in the corral and a neat cabin he had built himself. He showed them inside, gave her father the bed, and took the floor without a second thought. Fiona cooked and cleaned, trying to repay his kindness. But more than that, she watched him. Xander spoke little, but he always looked her in the eyes when he did. He listened. He saw her. One afternoon, she stood outside hanging clothes and saw him leading his horse back from the creek. His shirt was off, sweat on his chest, and she felt her breath catch. He caught her watching, stopped. Their eyes met. Fiona looked down, but not before she saw the warmth in his gaze. Not lust, just something quiet and real. Later that night they sat at the fire again. Her father was asleep. Xander passed her a mug of tea. "You are safe now." She nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "I do not know what comes next for you, but if you ever want to stay." He cleared his throat. "You are not a debt to me, not a burden." Fiona looked at him for a long time, then she reached out and touched his hand. "I do not want to leave," she said, her voice steady. Xander's fingers curled around hers. Neither of them said anything else that night, but something had started. And neither of them wanted to stop it. Morning light slanted through the cabin's single window, casting a pale gold across the floorboards. Fiona sat at the small table, mending a torn sleeve with careful stitches. The quiet was different here, no barked orders, no scuff of boots meant to intimidate. Only the soft clink of the needle and the muted breath of the fire in the hearth. Xander stepped through the door, his boots dusted with trail soil, a small sack tucked under his arm. "I passed the general store in Hollow Ridge," he said, setting the sack on the table. "Figured you might want your own thread and buttons. There's coffee, too." Fiona paused, her fingers stilling. "You didn't need to do that. I know." She opened the sack slowly. Inside was a spool of brown thread, a tin of coffee, and a folded piece of muslin clean and new. She ran her hand over the fabric, then looked up at him. "Thank you," she said, not softly but with a weight that made him meet her eyes. He nodded once, then sat down across from her, pulling a knife from his belt to peel a withered apple. "Your father asked if I had a spare pipe. I don't. But I can ride out tomorrow and see what I can find." Fiona tied off the stitch and set the shirt aside. "He used to smoke one after supper, said it helped his lungs back when they were better. He's got a sharp mind." "Asked me how I built the corral posts to keep the railings straight." She smiled faintly. "He built our house back in Missouri with his own 2 hands, no plans, just his eye and a chalk line." Xander handed her a slice of apple. She took it and chewed slowly, watching the way the lines around his eyes deepened when he smiled. "Do you ever think about going back?" he asked. She shook her head. "There's nothing left there. Not since the mill took the trees and the railmen took the land." He nodded, quiet again. Then, after a long pause, "You don't flinch when I walk in. That's rare." Fiona looked at him, puzzled. "Why would I? I've seen what men like Pike can do to a woman's trust." He tossed the apple core into the fire. "It's not small the way you look me in the eye." "Not to me." She folded the muslin into a neat square. "I'm not afraid of men, just tired of ones who think they own everything they see." His gaze held hers. "I don't want anything from you you're not choosing to give. You know that." "I do," she said, and she meant it. That afternoon, they worked side by side in the garden patch behind the cabin. The soil was dry but still good enough for beans and squash. Fiona traced the furrows with a hoe while Xander cleared the brush from the fence line. A hawk circled overhead once, then vanished beyond the ridge. "You ever thought about planting fruit trees?" she asked, pausing to rest her hands on the handle. "There's wild plum up the gully," he said. "I've been meaning to try grafting." She lifted a brow. "You know how to graft trees?" He leaned on his shovel. "I watched a man do it once in Kansas. Thought it might be worth remembering." She wiped her brow with her sleeve. "You remember a lot." I don't talk much, he said. Doesn't mean I'm not paying attention. They worked until the light turned amber. When they came inside, her father was awake, sitting up against the headboard with a folded quilt across his knees. Heard you two out there, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Sounds like you're making a good team. Fiona knelt beside the bed to check the water jug. We'll have a garden in before first frost. Her father's eyes lingered on her, then shifted to Xander. You planning to keep her around, son? Xander didn't blink. If she wants to stay, yes. Her father grunted. That's a straight answer. I like that. After supper, Fiona stepped out to wash the dishes in the basin near the well. The stars were just starting to blink through the twilight. Xander joined her with a towel, drying each plate she handed him. You've got calluses, he said, glancing at her hands. Hard days do that. They shouldn't have to. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at the sky, the constellations just beginning to form their old, familiar shapes. I used to trace those with my mother, she said. She'd tell stories about them. Said they were watching us. Xander followed her gaze. What do you think they see now? She turned to him. A man who did something no one asked him to, a woman trying to learn what it means to be free. He reached up and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. His touch was light, but she didn't move away. You're not alone in it, he said. She held his gaze, something steady passing between them. I know, she whispered. I'm starting to believe that. The air shifted with the season. By the middle of September, the wind had turned cooler, drier, with the scent of distant snow high in the Wind River Range. Fiona stood beside the chicken coop, a basket of eggs balanced on her hip, watching as Xander secured a new latch on the gate. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, exposing lean forearms dusted with saw grit. You always this quiet when you work? She asked, brushing a loose feather off her apron. He didn't glance up. Only when my hands are full. She moved closer, setting the basket down on the stump beside him. I noticed you don't keep a dog. He leaned back on his heels, testing the hinge. Had one once. Big, scrappy thing. Took off after a bobcat and never came back. Sorry, was years ago. Still get the urge to whistle sometimes, though. She crouched beside him, fingers brushing the edge of the gate. You think about getting another, he gave a slight shrug. Not much room for half measures. If I bring something here, it's because I intend to keep it. Fiona didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the fresh cut pine slats, the way his knuckles tightened as he adjusted the hinge. There was weight behind his words, measured, firm, like everything he did. She stood again, brushing off her skirt. Well, the chickens are safer with this fixed. They walked back toward the cabin together, boots crunching over dry grass. Her father's voice drifted from inside, humming low over the whir of his whittling knife. The tune was unfamiliar, carved rough and clean from memory. That evening, Xander brought out a battered wooden box from the back of the storage shelf. He set it on the table while Fiona was peeling apples. My mother's, he said, unlatching the lid. Inside lay a small stack of folded linens, a silver thimble, and a faded daguerreotype of a woman in a dark dress with wide cheekbones and steady eyes. Fiona paused mid-slice. She's beautiful. She was stricter than she looked, he said, not unkindly. Taught me to read off the pages of a seed catalog, made me recite aloud while splitting kindling. She smiled at that. My mother taught me verses while we shelled peas, said they'd stay longer if I sang them. He turned the photograph toward himself, then set it gently back in the box. She died near Abilene, fever after a flood. Fiona reached across and touched the edge of the box. Thank you for showing me. He closed the lid slowly. I didn't think I would, not with anyone. She set the apple slices in the pan, the sugar and cinnamon already measured. You don't talk much about where you've been. Because none of it felt like home, he said. The pie baked while the sun sank behind the ridge. Her father dozed in the rocker near the hearth, and Fiona stepped out onto the porch, arms folded against the chill. Xander joined her a moment later, the scent of wood smoke curling around them. You built all this on your own, she said, eyes on the horizon. I tried to build it for someone else, he replied. But she didn't stay. Fiona turned her head. You loved her, I thought so. But she wanted town life. Dresses, dances, folks to talk to. I couldn't give her that. Fiona's voice was quiet. Do you regret it? No, she needed something different. I just didn't know it soon enough. They stood in silence for a long while, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Then Fiona stepped a little closer, the boards creaking beneath her boots. I never thought I'd end up here, she said. Not with a man who listens before he speaks, not with a house that feels still. Xander's eyes didn't leave hers. You're not passing through, are you? She shook her head. Good, he said, almost a whisper. Because I don't want you to. She reached up, touched his jaw lightly, her fingers tracing the place where stubble met skin. His hand came to rest at her waist, slow, careful, but sure. Inside, the pie bubbled over, sending a faint sweetness into the cool night air. Neither of them moved to check it. Frost came early that year. By late October, the mornings were rimmed in silver, and the earth held a quiet tension like it was drawing breath before the snow. Fiona woke before the sun, pulling on wool stockings and lacing up her boots with fingers stiff from cold. The cabin was dim, but the coals in the hearth still glowed faintly from the night before. She added kindling, coaxed the flame back to life, and set the kettle on the hook. Her father stirred under the quilt, his cough softer than it had been weeks ago. She brought him a mug of warm water and a clean cloth for his brow, then stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her shawl tight. Xander was behind the barn, stacking wood in long, tidy rows beneath the lean-to. A light mist clung to the low fields, and his breath rose in soft puffs as he worked. Fiona crossed the yard, her boots leaving clean prints in the white-crusted grass. You'll need another cord before December, she said, her voice low in the quiet. He set down the axe and turned. I was hoping you'd say that. I was thinking we could ride up past Bear Hollow tomorrow. There's deadfall near the ridge, she nodded. I'll pack bread and beans. We'll need ropes. He reached for the next log. The mare's been restless. She could use a long pull. She watched the easy rhythm of his arms as he worked. You always plan this far ahead, only since you and your father came. Before that, it didn't much matter if the roof leaked or the fence broke. She looked down, brushing her fingers over the rough grain of a fence post. I think I've forgotten how to live without looking behind me. He didn't speak for a beat. Then you don't have to forget. Just don't let it decide everything. They rode out the next morning as the sun rose pale over the low hills. Fiona wore thick gloves and her braid was tucked beneath her scarf. Xander led the way, the wagon creaking behind them, wheels crunching over frozen ruts. The silence between them was easy, filled with the soft clop of hooves and the rustle of wind among bare branches. They reached the ridge by midday and set to work. Xander felled a leaning elm with 3 clean strokes, and Fiona looped the ropes around the trunk while he cleared the brush. When they paused, she handed him a tin cup of coffee from the fire she'd built. You used to work timber? She asked, watching the steam curl from his cup. Briefly. Oregon coast, too wet, too many trees falling the wrong way, she smiled. My father would say that's just poor reading of the lean. He'd be right. Xander watched the fire for a long moment. He's steadier now, stronger. He's thinking about carving again, she said. Said he had a pattern in mind. Xander nodded. He asked me yesterday if I'd let him fix the rocking chair. Fiona raised an eyebrow. You said yes. Would have been foolish not to. She bent to adjust the coals. You always let people help, not always. But I'm learning. They loaded the wagon slow and steady, Xander guiding the trunks while Fiona secured them. By the time they turned back, the sun was low, painting the scrub hills in rust and gold. That night after supper, her father took to the chair with a rasp and a length of sandpaper. Fiona sat at the table sewing a new curtain for the back window. Xander stood behind her, hands in his pockets, watching the way her needle moved without pause. You ever think about staying for good? He asked, voice quiet enough not to carry. She looked up. I already have. His brow furrowed slightly. I mean it, she said, setting the needle down. I don't want to leave, he stepped closer. I don't want you to. She felt him beside her, solid, certain, and warm despite the cold that pressed against the walls. She rose slowly, turning to face him fully. "I'm not a woman who needs rescuing," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I know," he said. "That's not why I want you here." Her breath came slow. "Then why?" He reached for her hand. "Because with you, this place breathes different. Feels like it's meant to hold more than just one man's quiet." She stepped forward, closing the space between them. "You make me feel like I belong somewhere, like I'm not just trying to survive." His hand brushed her cheek, rough and warm. "You're more than what happened to you. And I want to be the kind of man who never forgets that." She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "Then we build something together." He answered without words, just the press of his lips against hers, gentle, certain, and whole. The fire crackled low, the old chair creaked as her father worked, and outside, snow began to fall in fine, drifting threads quiet as a beginning. The valley thawed slow that spring. Ice receded from the creek little by little, revealing stones dulled from months beneath its grip. Fiona stood with her sleeves rolled, rinsing potatoes in the shallows while the water rushed cool over her hands. A robin called from the alder nearby, sharp and bright. Behind her, smoke curled from the cabin chimney, steady against the pale sky. Inside, Xander was sanding a length of pine board across the grain, building shelves for the far wall. The room had grown fuller over the months, not cluttered, but lived in. A woven rug near the hearth, a second chair built by her father's hands, and in the corner, a small table with a half-finished carving of a doe and her fawn. Fiona stepped through the door carrying the cleaned potatoes in her apron. She paused a moment to watch him work. His shirt was open at the throat, sawdust clinging to his forearms. He didn't look up right away, but he knew she was there. "I think the creek's ready for trout lines again," she said, setting the potatoes on the table. "I've got twine in the loft. Hooks too, though they'll need sharpening." He turned the board over, brushing the edge with his thumb. "We'll go tomorrow. If we catch enough, I'll smoke them in the pit out back." She crossed the room and leaned against the wall near him. "You planning to keep feeding me like this forever?" His eyes lifted. "I was hoping to." Fiona smiled, slow and sure. "Then maybe it's time we make that something official." He set the board down without a word, wiped his hands on a cloth and reached into the drawer by the stove. When he turned back, he held a ring, plain silver, worn smooth around the edges. "My mother's," he said. "She gave it to me before she passed, told me not to offer it unless I meant it." Fiona looked at it, then at him. "Do you?" "I've meant it since the moment you chose to stay." She didn't hesitate. "Then put it on me." He did, gently, his hand closing around hers once it was done. "We'll say the words in the hollow when the blossoms come in, just us and your father. That's all I need. He'll want to make you something for the day, let him. I was counting on it." That evening, she sat beside her father while he sharpened his smallest carving knife. "You remember how to tie a fisherman's knot?" she asked. He nodded. "Your mother taught me." "Wrapped my first finger in linen when I caught it wrong." Fiona smiled. "I think she'd have liked it here." "She'd have liked him," he said without looking up. "I do." They wed beneath the cottonwoods 2 weeks later. The trees had just begun to leaf out, and the air smelled of damp soil and new grass. Fiona wore a dress she'd sewn from muslin dyed with walnut shell, and Xander had shaved close for the first time since winter. Her father stood between them, voice steady despite the rasp in his chest, and spoke the vows from memory. Afterward, they shared bread and dried berries, and Xander poured coffee from a tin pot warmed over coals. No music played, but Fiona hummed a tune her mother once sang, and Xander joined in by instinct, his voice low and rough beneath hers. That night, the cabin held a stillness that wasn't empty. Fiona sat on the porch rail, watching the sky soften into dusk. Xander came to stand behind her, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "You know," she said, leaning back slightly, "I never thought I'd want this." He didn't ask what she meant, he just waited. This kind of peace. "It scared me more than the hard parts ever did." He rested his chin lightly on her head. "It won't always be easy." "I know," she said, but it'll be ours. That summer the garden bore thick with beans and squash, and her father carved a cradle from aspen wood, though no one asked him to. When Fiona found herself queasy in the mornings come August, Xander only kissed her temple and said, "I was wondering when we'd know." By mid-autumn, her father had finished a second chair and was working on a set of toys shaped like prairie animals. Fiona's belly rounded beneath her apron, and Xander took over the heavier chores without being asked. He never made her feel helpless. Just helped. They finished the shelves in the front room, lined them with jars of dried herbs, and left a space at the bottom for small hands to reach someday. The baby came in early February, just as the first snowmelt began to whisper along the edges of the creek. A girl, with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet. They named her Clara, after the wind that first brought Fiona west. Fiona held her close that first night, firelight flickering on the walls, and Xander sat beside them, one hand resting lightly on her knee. Her father watched from the rocker, a slow smile on his face. Outside, the land slept under frost. Inside, the cabin breathed with warmth, with love built slow and steady, like fence posts sunk deep and true. They did not speak of the past. They didn't need to. What they had now was enough, and it would carry them day by day into every season yet to come.